Hello, I'm Mike Whitaker, Industry Co-Chair for this year's Igniting Innovation Conference and Awards. We have a great session coming up for you on applying human-centered design to procurement innovation. To make this session successful, it is important for you all to participate. So this is going to be less of a passive one than the earlier speakers. As part of that, I would encourage you, if you're going to participate in this session, to move forward. I understand that it can be hard to hear as you get near that opening, so if you get a moment, please do come forward. You're going to end up working with some partners during this session. Now, please join me in welcoming Eliana Zavala from OMB's Office of Federal Procurement Policy to kick off the session.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's very exciting to be here in a room full of innovators contributing to modern advances in technology and increasing the use of modern acquisition solutions. As you can see here today, with this year's Igniting Innovation nominations and soon to be announced awardees that have resulted in significantly improved services and government operations. Before I turn the stage over to our guest speakers and to you, our collaborators in this interactive session, I will take a few short minutes to address an effort underway that touches agencies government-wide, our industry partners, customers, and end users alike. The Office of Federal Procurement Policy at OMB is paving the path for agencies to try new ways of doing business, to acquire complex services, digital services, among other commodities. We are working directly with agency-designated acquisition innovation advocates with the support of senior leaders to create an infrastructure to break down barriers to innovation and build a culture that instills innovation in the acquisition system. Acquisition should not be considered the impediment to what success looks like. We created version 1.0 of the Acquisition Innovation Hub on the GSA's Gateway, now accessible to both government and the public, and will make enhancements as a result of usability testing. We are also partnering with OPM, GSA, and the Federal Acquisition Institute on launching a new platform of acquisitions open opportunities, which will facilitate networking, peer-to-peer cross-training, and career development by asking for expertise or offering expertise through a Craigslist approach. This is really an innovative way of facilitating continuous learning while developing the workforce in the acquisition realm. Equally important is OFPP's outlook of increasing its direct engagement with the acquisition workforce to hear from frontline staff, our future leaders, about what is working and where we can make improvements. Why does this matter? How do these actions aid in modernizing how the federal government meets mission outcomes and delivers improved services to the American people? When put into practice, results have generated more efficient and faster time to contract award, improved delivery of outcomes, increased access to non-traditional contractors and emerging technologies, and greater customer satisfaction. The 2017 Igniting Innovation overall winner effectively improved the DHS Verification Information System, a legacy system used by over 600,000 companies nationwide to improve verification of employment eligibility provided through E-Verify, as we heard earlier this morning. Using the Department of Commerce's NTIS joint venture partnership, results indicated a 30% decrease in case status verification processing time and 46% decrease in employer time to enrollment. That was using NTIS's evidence-based tools from data collection through analysis and application in abbreviated cycles. Using this authority, NTIS and agencies are jointly identifying root causes of problems and working on solutions, improving internal core capacities and delivering better results. Other significant outcomes have been achieved with the expert help of U.S. Digital Service, infusing experienced digital strategies in agency projects, and the GSA Technology Transformation Services, including 18F and Challenges and Prizes, once again heard about this morning. And agency also are using in-house talent, which have improved appeal claim processing times for veterans and reimagined ways of protecting the homeland, just to name a few more examples. Efforts are paying off. by strengthening talent management, testing and using modernized technologies and acquisition practices, incorporating data elements in decision-making, and also applying program management principles. Successful agency attempts at testing, iterating, and adopting new and modern practices tend to have similar characteristics, such as stakeholder collaboration, process refinements, customer engagement, and early and frequent exchanges with industry. You can refer to OFBP's series on myth-busting and outputs from ACT-IAC events like this one, Lifting the Curtain and Acquisition Excellence. I'll mention a DHS Procurement Innovation Lab example to illustrate. There are others, but in the interest of time, and since I know the DHS team is eager to get in front of you, I'll say a few words about the PIL's virtual lab space where DHS contracting professionals experiment innovative techniques in a safe space. Top executives at DHS support and promote managed risk-taking. PIL coaches guide contracting officers while developing internal capacity in DHS components. Information sharing of prior PIL procurements is common practice at DHS, and post-award vendor feedback is customary and incorporated in future procurement strategies. What you will hear firsthand from members of the DHS today and their work with the Procurement Innovation Lab is the value they created that did not exist before, while improving mission delivery and the customer experience. So how can you, or we, get to the future state of trying approaches that continuously create value and become the norm when managed failures are removed more than the status quo and are revalued? Let's hear how our DHS colleagues did just that. After the acquisition team shares its story, I encourage you to engage with them, then engage with the person sitting next to you, and prepare yourself to replicate and tailor at least one strategy or technique at your home organization or with your customer. Now, I would like to introduce Arianne Miller, the Managing Director of the lab at the OPM, to tell us about the human-centered design approach she will facilitate with us. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Happy to be here with you today. So, just to give you a little context for the program that I manage and what human-centered design is in general, the lab at OPM is a practice that actually provides capacity building and capability building through design education for federal agencies. We do a lot of that in the context of projects, right? Because it's a discipline best learned through doing. And that's how we also create value for partners. So you heard an example earlier of the National School Lunch Program and how we worked with them. The goal of that is not only to improve the form itself, but also to actually teach and work with that staff to give them a new set of skills to apply to future work, right? So human-centered design as a discipline is fundamentally something that helps you navigate complex problems and creatively design effective solutions that are responsive to the real needs and wants of people, both expressed and latent, right? So what does that actually mean? Because I don't think most of us would say that we're not here to design for things that people want and need. But the difference is, if you were to replace human with something else in that sort of human-centered language, there are a lot of things that when you actually experience products, services, policies, et cetera, that often replace the word human. We make an awful lot of things that are technology-centered, things that are law-centered, things that are policy-centered, things that are expert-centered, right? Things that put first and foremost something other than the people who are going to experience that system, and as a result, don't get you all of the results that you're hoping to get, right? So if a thing is technology-centered, you might experience it as having a 50-page manual, right, that you as the person are responsible for navigating and digesting and learning, because nobody bothered to say what was most important is that you can actually engage with it in a way that makes sense to you, right? It's your job to figure out the technology because the technology is what matters, right? A lot of forms, a lot of things that we interact with in government are law or policy centered. They're written in a way that puts as a priority sort of somebody who has expertise in that domain, right? And instead of the person who's going to use it and the needs that they might have. I think some of the examples from the lightning talks were really great. Like the identitytheft.gov, right? When they're talking about redesigning that, he actually mentioned the emotional state of a user as something that they considered. So yes, absolutely, there are all kinds of legal implications and laws and regulations that have to be accounted for in that product, but ultimately, a person who's using it is likely in a state of anxiety, of fear, of frustration, right? And so you have to design with that in mind not because it's nice, but because that's how it's going to actually get done, right? That's a necessary requirement, and if we can acknowledge that, we'll design things that people actually can engage with. So with that context, as we listen to the story of the folks I'm about to introduce, what I want you to listen for, which I haven't heard their story, so I don't know how much it'll be to the forefront or the background, I want you to listen for decisions that were made with the people in mind, right? And so that conversation that I'd like you to have after we listen to the presentation, do a bit of Q&A, we like to leave a few minutes to talk with someone else, someone near you in the room, and just highlight a couple of elements that you heard that were related to decisions made in response to human needs in this system, right? And we want to highlight those and bring them forward. So, allow me to introduce our panel. From DHS, we're going to talk about the service management tool and the support services procurement. So please welcome Gregory Ruderman, Associate Director of the IT Acquisition Center, Scott Simpson, Contracting Officer at the IT Acquisition Center, and Kofi Asante, Service Delivery Manager in the Office of the CIO at DHS. Gentlemen, the floor is yours. Getting that.
All right, that's me. So I'm going to provide a little bit of background. Again, my name is Kofi Asante. We were looking to upgrade our service management tool because the current one that we had was expiring as far as its licenses. So we had to move very quickly to upgrade the service management tool that we were using. This was a critical need for us because the old service management tool, which was Remedy as a Service, was dated for us, and we needed to find a tool that would catch us up with the times, kind of modernize what we're doing as an IT shop. And we realized we were kind of handicapped by the current tool that we were using. We needed a tool that would provide better customer service for us. We wanted to engage the customer in all IT services so that they could know exactly what's going on the back end. And then we needed a tool that would give us the opportunity to keep our IT vendors more accountable, checking on SLAs, checking on ticket queues, things like that. So again, this is the IT background of things that were going on. What made this complex for us was, I don't know how many of you guys are familiar with DHS, but our IT shop is pretty complex, and it includes a wide range of different functions. So we needed a team that had a good technical knowledge of everything that's going on at DHS. And also, the technical team that worked on this acquisition had very little acquisition experience. This was my first acquisition project, and we really relied on the gentleman next to us to walk us through the acquisition part of it. So it's amazing the time we were able to acquire and award this contract with the little experience that we had. One good thing about our technical team is we had a good understanding of everything that was going on in our environment. So we were able to speak and write down a lot of the requirements that we were going to need from the new vendor that was going to bring the updated service management tool to us. But then again, we still needed help. Scott and Greg, the rock stars sitting next to me, will explain exactly how they helped us. And I'll give it to Scott. Or Greg, I'm sorry.
Good morning. I'm Gregory Ruderman, and I am Associate Director with Procurement Operations in the IT Acquisition Center at DHS. And primarily we support the Office of the Chief Information Officer. So this was an interesting project. I'd like to discuss the mission-focused support effort of the project. We conducted market research. We decided that selecting a GSA schedule approach would be really the best strategy for this. Using FAR 8.4, we chose a stay-in-your-lane type of a strategy and solution that really, since our experience has shown that the acquisition process should be streamlined at times, and we as acquisition professionals, it's really our mission to make it seamless and as straightforward for our program office and our customers as possible. So too often we take what should be a streamlined acquisition or even a simplified procurement, and we make it more challenging than necessary. So our goal was to overcome that. The goal was not even just to, in an effort to overcome that, we really had to not just shift language, not talk about this as a FAR 15 source selection type project, change the terminology, use the right terminology, use the correct FAR part, streamline, but manage it using that right lane, stay in your lane. It's a concept that we are constantly pushing. And surprisingly, or really unfortunately, it's a lot harder than it needs to be sometimes. So this concept is something that we're pushing continuously and to try to make our future projects a little more streamlined and successful. The end result's going to be the same. We're always here to support the program office, and we just want to make it as smooth as possible. So the stay in your lane philosophy, essentially, it promotes flexibility, it promotes efficiency and simplicity. And while this was not a simple project, we definitely did not want to treat it like a major source selection using a complex FAR 15 source selection like mindset and using contract by negotiations. FAR 8.4 allows us the flexibility with GSA schedules to really streamline, and it's vastly different from an acquisition technical level than a FAR 15 source selection. So after a few meetings with the OCIO team, our technical folks, and our customer, I realized this wasn't really, this was about their mission, supporting their mission. It wasn't about what I needed as a contracting officer, what Scott needed as a contracting officer to fulfill their mission. It was really about them. And maybe this is the human-centered aspect supporting their procurement and supporting the customer. And I realized that streamlining a project is imperative, and what could be cumbersome for a technical team, especially a technical team that's relatively new to the acquisition process, and not just preparing a work statement or a requirements document, but going through all the way through the technical evaluation process and documenting that. I knew that they needed to be supported, and we wanted to make it easier for them. And this process definitely permitted that, and it was supported. And so the goal was to keep it simple, and well, we can talk about that on the next slide, so I'll hand it off to Scott.
Thanks, Matt. So these are some of the These are some of the innovations that we used in order to try to streamline the process for a technical team that didn't have a lot of acquisition experience, and for us to be able to award this $58 million task order in about 42 days. So none of these are really that complicated. The first one we did was consistent communication with industry. That meant engaging them early for market research, talking with them, taking their input back to the team, not just in the acquisition strategy, but on what the technical requirements were going to be, inputting that into our requirement and going back out with a second iteration. We did this 2 or 3 times. Finally, when we thought the document was ready, we gave them a draft of the total solicitation as we went through our internal reviews. We let them put their comments out on it. We took what we thought was useful and we made more changes. We went back and forth like this. We also were completely open with where we were in the process. So we let them know, hey, this is where we're at. We think we're going to be here for the next couple of days, and the next step is this. We gave them as much as we could, and as you'll see from the end, industry really appreciated this. Our second innovation was having a 2-phased evaluation approach with a mandatory down select. And this isn't really that innovative because this is something that the FAR directs that you can do on certain things. The innovation here is how we applied it to our solicitation. So for phase 1, we had a hard mandatory down select of go, no go. And it was tied to the key minimum technical requirements of our program. So we took the key foundation or functionality of the program. We took the FedRAMP certification, We took all of the key personnel certifications that you were going to need to implement the project, and we made those a hard down select on the first phase. If you didn't meet all of those, then you were not invited to participate in oral presentations in phase 2. That really was open with industry to say, hey, if you don't have these minimum ones, we don't want to set you up for failure. We want you to succeed too, and so this is what we think it takes to succeed. And again, we gave that out to people. We let them question it. I think we added and subtracted a couple of factors in phase 1, and then afterwards we moved on to phase 2. So phase 2 was only an oral presentation. There was no written technical submission. It was oral presentations with a PowerPoint, as well as an Excel spreadsheet for the price quote, where they just had to put in their prices. They put in the prices, the formula populated everything else. We tried to keep it as streamlined as possible. We kept this thing lean. So you didn't see in phase 2 technical approach and a management approach and a past performance. We only looked at what we thought was necessary. We didn't even look at past performance until the very end when we did a responsibility determination. Instead, we were looking at corporate experience because we found corporate experience was more telling for success. Greg, do you want to talk about the next 2?
So I'm going to discuss the Thank you. I'm going to discuss the real-time consensus and streamlined evaluations. And this was, well, as I mentioned earlier, we wanted to keep things simple. I didn't want to make extra work for the technical team, by no means. And we wanted to push forward with the procurement and really achieve the mission result, which ultimately, as a contracting officer, it's contract award, which kicks off the project. It's just the beginning of the project. So, like I said, we wanted to treat this as a streamlined project. It was a GSA scheduled task order. We did not want to treat it like a source selection. And along with that philosophy, we decided to go with that oral presentation strategy with no technical quotation, no technical proposal. Using the stay in your lane theme, we wanted to convert that proposal terminology to quotation. We're not asking for a proposal, we were asking for quotes. So we also decided that it would be a good idea to capture the technical team's opinion on the spot. And basically that meant immediately after oral presentations, same day, real-time evaluation. Document it while it's fresh in our head. So we got together after each oral presentation every day and did that. And I think we actually had to lock the room, keep people from leaving so we can make sure every day we finished and documented before people left for the day and went home. I actually think that this strategy was very successful. We didn't leave anything out in open. We completed every documentation of each oral presentation every day. And I actually think we did lock the doors and keep people in one day. So this goes into the next bullet, which really it's about the comparative analysis piece, and that's really writing up this technical opinion. So after after the technical opinion was documented, we had to really formulate or format the evaluation in a way that didn't use ratings. We decided not to utilize the standard numbers, colors, adjectival ratings, the very good or excellent type, quantifiable approach, or really more subjective approach. We decided to go with a non-traditional comparative analysis evaluation strategy. So what this did was it allowed us to document what we liked and didn't like about each solution. And that gives you a really different mindset, because we're not focused on ratings or numbers, or this firm is rated as a 95 and this one's a 92. Which one's really better? I mean, that type of quantification is really difficult to make successful, and from a protest standpoint as well. I think it's challenging to use a numerical system, and so we're trying to get away from adjectival ratings and the old way of doing things, and certainly on projects that can be more streamlined. So we formalized this comparison approach. We basically aligned with our RFQ, with our request for quote. It was in accordance with our basis for award, and it was really documented completely in the procurement award summary, which basically is the culmination that explains the contracting officer's award decision. So with that said, I'm going to pass it back over to Scott to talk about our Procurement Innovation Lab.
Thanks, Greg. One of the best things about this project was working with the DHS Procurement Innovation Lab. And this is a group of knowledgeable contracting professionals that aren't serving as the contracting officer for that acquisition. They may have been contracting officer in a future life. They may go back to that later on. But for the moment, they kind of step out of that role, and they're just contracting for professionals. And because they're not the contracting officer, they're able to apply this out-of-the-box perspective to the acquisition that you're doing. So we sat down with them every 2 weeks, and they questioned and gave thoughts about what we were doing, and talked about, well, could you do it this way? What could you do it differently? Do you really need that? Can you strip this out? And they really helped us from being over here outside of the policy and everything else, look at our procurement and streamline it as much as we could, while still getting to Kofi's result of the mission-focused, people-focused solution that we needed to get to. They also, in the pill, have reached back across multiple DHS components, across other procurement innovation labs that are outside of DHS. They have samples, they have ideas, they know what other people are working on that might be similar to yours. They know what's working and what's not working, and they've got the GAO cases to back up that approach. So some of the things that we were doing, we didn't know if it was going to work, and they said, well, here's the GAO case that says that you can do it. If you think it's going to work, you can do it. And we went with that, and it was a really great resource. And at the end of it, this is the best part. At the end of it, they go out and they interview all the quoters, both successful and unsuccessful. They talk to the program office, and they find out what worked, what didn't work. What did you like? What could we do differently? And they gave us all that feedback for next time. It didn't help with the procurement we did, but they gave us that feedback for next time. It's sort of like a debrief just for the contracting officers. And on the next page, you'll see some of that. But that feedback helps us know what we did with the streamlining. It wasn't just to do something new and do something differently. It actually worked, and it made a difference. And then after all of that was said and done, after the interviews and everything else, then we gave us our presentation to the DHS webinar that was attended by over 400 acquisition professionals, and we told our story. We told them what we did, we told them how we did it, we told them why we did it, to spark a conversation amongst not just headquarters, but amongst FEMA and CBP and ICE and everyone else. And I've had so many calls from that webinar to say, oh, we're doing oral presentations too. How did you think it went? Or I really want to do comparative analysis because I think it's really easy to write up. What do you think is the best kind of forum to use that in? And it sparks this great synergy among the whole department that you wouldn't have otherwise from not presenting at a webinar or something like that. And this is some of the feedback that we got that I think is the most important. And it's feedback that validates the objectives of the innovations and the streamlining that we did. The most efficient and properly managed acquisition I've been a part of in the recent past. Whenever we had questions, the CEO was an absolute pleasure to work with and very responsive. It goes back to our goal to be consistently communicative with industry. And it looks like industry understood that and said we did a good job. Having us submit pricing later was a real advantage. It made phase one an easy lift, and the phase one factors were aligned to the outcome. Again, this validates the fact that we were trying to streamline. Phase one only had what we thought was necessary in it, and that's what they said it did. And then the measured down selects are valuable. Doing something more important than paper-based proposals and evaluation process helps the DHS understand what you're buying, and you get better results than paper-only evaluations. I mean, that's perfect. It validates for us like what we did was the right thing. It wasn't just doing something new to do something new. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we want to definitely take at least 5 minutes or so if there's any questions in the audience. We've got one right there. All right.
Hi.
Hi, my name is Daria Badani with REI Systems. My question was really to you when you had said, we looked at the very minimum, sorry, to all of you really, we looked at the very minimum when we were considering how to make that down select. And that was my question is, when you are thinking about that, where do you set the bar for that so you're making it appropriate when you're moving to phase 2 for the vendors? Do you set the bar high or do you set the bar low? And can you just elaborate a little bit on your thought process?
Go ahead.
Thanks.
I can start with a response on that. That's a very good question. And it does vary from project to project. I guess to make a long answer shorter, it's something that we want to maximize competition. That's one of the tenets of this entire acquisition process. I personally did not want to exclude someone from this procurement that would have a chance of receiving an award. While we're outside that FAR 15 process and we're not setting a competitive range, great. We're not doing formal competitive ranges, but that go no-go process in phase 1, it really allowed us to exclude any company that just really wasn't qualified. Or maybe they didn't have a FedRAMP certified solution that was, a deal breaker. It would take us weeks, months, a year longer to implement a project if it wasn't certified. So we made it somewhat simplistic. It wasn't really intended to kick anyone out of phase 1, but we really did not want to force companies to submit that full technical proposal if they weren't qualified. And a lot of times, the tech team ends up reading thousands of pages, and then they're like telling us that someone's not qualified. So the goal was really to eliminate that aspect and streamline. Would you like to add anything to that?
You did a great
job. Very good. Thank you. Anyone else? Sure.
Bobby Browning from Qualtrics. This is amazing, and I can't imagine why anybody would do anything else. For you to have awarded a $58 million contract in 42 days, so hats off. How does this become pervasive?
I think it becomes pervasive by doing things like this. We did our webinar afterwards. We got to 400 acquisition professionals. The webinar got 4 out of 5 stars. Talking to you all, getting the story out there that it's possible to do it, even on things that seem complex. And then changing the mindset so that people aren't always in, well, this is a source selection. No, it's not. This is a GSA order. You can keep it simple. So just getting the word out there as we get the next generation of contracting officers coming up, getting to them, and you'll just see it start becoming more and more the reality.
That's exactly correct. I said earlier, surprisingly, this is harder to implement and perpetuate than it should be. It's up to us each day as our bosses, our supervisors, our leadership uses terms that are associated to a FAR part that's outside the lane. I hear the word source selection as a contracting officer, I'm thinking, oh, this is a complex contract by negotiation project. It's being said in the context of a simple task order off of IDIQ that should be done literally in 45 days. So it's constantly using the right terminology, being proactive, using that language, and really it's a grassroots approach.
So as follow-up, is that webinar something that you're at liberty to share with industry?
Well, it is a DHS product that's accessible to all DHS employees. That's something that
you'd have to talk to the pill.
Yes, feel free, send us an email and we can formalize that. If it's acceptable for dissemination, absolutely. We know the request for quote is public, so that's a part of the documentation we shared and went through.
All right. Any other questions? Oh, all right.
Does anybody else have a question?
Anyone else before we return? I think we're okay. Go ahead.
So my question is really for those of us that follow DHS closely. We know that DHS has really embraced a show me, don't tell me approach. And it's really helped make acquisitions, I think, very much about how you separate the wheat from the chaff. Like, we really want to understand what you do well. How is it easier both on the vendor and both on the contracting offices and on the acquisitions team? And just marrying it with sort of the human-centered design approach, I would say, is there a way to encourage more dialogue with industry as you continue to shape these kinds of show me, don't tell me approaches? Because as we see videos, submissions, technical challenges, coding challenges, I think it's new and innovative and entrepreneurial and welcome, but I think also merits really understanding what that new kind of onus of responsibility is on the contractor. And I welcome your thoughts. It's really meant as a comment, but a question.
I could briefly touch on that comment. It's up to us to make sure that we do engage with industry and they understand what we're asking for. It's one thing to be innovative. I think Scott mentioned this. We're not just doing this to do something new and to try to be innovative. We really want to get to the end result, which is supporting the OCIO and the program office that developed that requirement. That industry engagement and the clear understanding it's important. Otherwise, we get flooded with questions, and it does slow the process down a little bit if there is confusion. So, in all these streamlining projects, it's crystal clear communication is important. And we were lucky on this project. It wasn't really a technically challenging project in terms of what we were procuring. If you know what you're buying, it makes it a lot easier. Sometimes it's maybe not suited for a very complex, undefined requirement. Those are a little harder.
But I think
that's easy for Greg to say.
Well, the COTS type solution, Kofi is doing a great job implementing this, which
Today's our first day of go live, so.
Oh.
Yeah.
I think it's also about communication from industry, though. A lot of times we do these things innovatively, and we're trying to make things easier for our team, and we don't see the impact that it's having on industry. So if you can have an open relationship with the contracting officer or the PM and say, hey, this was really hard for us. We spent this many hours or this much money. Then that gives us pause to say, maybe we won't do it that way again, or if you have ideas for, hey, but we could do it differently next time, and you could save us a whole bunch of money. That would be great too, because we don't want you spending more money that you shouldn't have to.
So I'm actually going to take this opportunity and ask a question to Kofi, because you stepped right into something I was wondering. As someone who is new to this process, sounds like, in a process that was new to this agency, what about this was sort of responsive to your particular needs in this situation? What about the process helped you and what you were facing as somebody new to this?
Yeah, as someone new, it's kind of like a rookie joining a team and they win the Super Bowl. So this is what you're going to expect moving forward. So I don't know otherwise. So we're working on it. We're in the beginning stages of another acquisition, and we're working with Scott again. So I'm expecting the same results. But again, I understand that there's different challenges that go along with it. But again, because I'm new,
don't know any better?
I don't know any better. Right.
Or any worse?
Right.
Great. Well, so here's what we're going to do. Noting the time and noting the very real human need to have food and eat so that we can be back for the 12 o'clock when that starts. I think I'll just hope that you've been kind of taking mental notes as you've gone and listened to this. And I'll offer a few thoughts and reflections on what I heard, sort of on this question of where were the human needs being met, and then we'll wrap it up. Okay. So I think an important element that I heard come up in a few different moments was about a need that's a little more unique to the humans in the federal system than it might be elsewhere, and that's that need of risk management and sort of fear and personal liability, right? Came up a little bit right there when, can we share the webinar, right? Well, let me just double check that, right? I need to know for sure. So products that make it clear, am I safe here? Am I okay to make this decision? It came up loud and clear in this conversation about how the pill goes and does that research around the GAO reports to say, yes, it's okay. And they give you the buttressing and the support to know, I'm not out here on a limb all by myself, right? So there were a lot of elements, it sounded like, in here where people were acknowledging that the decision makers are under a lot of potential pressure and under scrutiny, and there's a need to make sure we're giving them a sense of security, right, where that's appropriate, that they have the information that they can make those decisions. So I think that was really important. I liked really the marriage of course, efficiency and streamlining the time and the effort, that was incredibly important. But what that actually means in the human context, time is our most precious limited thing, right? You're all here serving a mission. Every agency that has a mission is serving that mission for people ultimately, right? So we need the people waiting for the thing that this is gonna help, right? Those people have a very real need. Time is precious to them. Folks doing the work, time is precious to them. So a lot of this, when you talk about streamlining, it's important to quantify it and to think about it in numbers and dollars. But it's also really important to understand that it is also about what that means for the people doing the work, sort of their ability to feel good, to have successful, to win the Super Bowl, right? Have these moments, get to be on stage and talk about their work and sort of have that acknowledgement and recognition. That it has a lot to do with if we can keep things moving, we can have more than one win every 5 years because it didn't take us 5 years to get that win, that we're going to actually have a more engaged and successful workforce, right? So just kind of acknowledging that while this is a huge win in terms of the money and the time saved, it's also one for all of the people, and we heard about a lot of folks in the system whose time was given back to them to do all the other things on their list that was important to them, right? So I think this has been a really nice example and one that I'm glad that we could share with you all. And so with that, I just want to thank you again for your time.
Thank you.
Go have a nice lunch, and we'll see you guys back here at 12.